effectively, my business model was to sell a simulated disaster. And then COVID came and everybody had an actual disaster for their business. And they didn't need to practice another disaster on top of the disaster they had. So I had to pivot again. And I did some leadership training first. I joined the John Maxwell Leadership Company and as a speaker, trainer, coach. And I refined and practiced and honed those skills.
Hello to my listeners and welcome to Age of Reinvention. How to discover a new freedom lifestyle and purpose after 15. This podcast is specifically designed for those of you in midlife who are seeking inspiration and guidance and personal development, innovation, and leadership. I'm your host, Emily Bron, and today we have a genuinely inspiring episode. We'll be diving into the power of reinvention, exploring how it can transform not just our personal lives, but also entire organizations. Our guest, Daniel Hammond, will be sharing his insights and experiences on this fascinating topic. Hold onto your hats because our guest today is nothing short of a modern-day wizard navigating complex terrains. Join us is remarkable Daniel Hammond, a man of many talents, including author, cybersecurity specialist, innovator, philanthropist, and yes, even a strategic dragon slayer. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. Just to share with you who is Daniel Hammond, I should start from where we're coming from, our childhood. I understood that your family, your parents actually influenced you from first days, and how the fact that they have such different careers and actually personality types influenced who you are today.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so glad to be here and with not just you, but this amazing audience that you have. And yeah, my mom is a PhD in biochemistry. So she's very scientific in her thinking. She's a great researcher. She worked at NASA and did experiments in space and cool things like that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, my dad has always been passionate about training and development, and I have that passion as well. And my dad he cares deeply for people, and I care deeply for people. And that has served me well, no matter what I've done in my life, is I'm always looking for a way to provide more value to the people that I'm working with. And so that's a big takeaway from that. We grew up in a class life. Mom wasn't a PhD when I was a little kid. That came later, but she was a scientist. And we moved. I moved from Miami, Tennessee, Nashville when I was 2 and lived there for 8 years. It was a great place to grow up. Nice, safe. Never heard a bad word in my first 10 years of life, probably, and sheltered a little bit. But we moved to Chicago and all those things fell away. I entered the real world and lived there for a couple of years before I moved here to the Houston area near NASA. And it's more or less, as I've lived abroad, I've also was in the Army, active duty.
We will go to it.
All right.
But the question was like, how do you feel that your parents influenced you from the beginning?
Sure. So from dad, it's definitely a care about people. That's my motivator, is to add value. And then from mom, it's what's going on in this space and how are things connected. And I don't take things that are told to me at face value, especially if something doesn't feel right about it. I'm somebody who, if I read an article, I'm like, what's the source of this information? When you let me, I'll talk about my military background, but it was intelligence. And so pursuing truth was something that I got from my mom. What's really going on in this space? Sometimes that makes me a conspiracy theorist, but usually one that's pretty close to on target.
Well, it's just deeper kind of analysis and desire to understand what is inside. I think I fully understand you. And what I found interesting and amazing for myself is that you like games and you collected a lot of board games, like around 700. And I believe it's helped you to shape your strategic thinking. So tell a little bit more about it, and if you have time to use these games now.
Sure. Yeah, that's a fair question. So I guess one of the things that I like is figuring things out and figuring people out. What are the forces acting on people and systems, and how do they influence them? And so one of the things I like about board games is every time I open a new box, I learn new rules and I see how the components of the game interact with each other. So it's a puzzle to solve, something to come out. And I've done playtesting for games. So games before they come to market, I played them and then I provide feedback in how could this game be better. Sometimes I've had some pretty substantial contributions on what the final game looked like. In one, I would say a component I suggested was arguably maybe a third of the strategy component of the game. That's been an interesting part of life. And I love figuring things out. I figure things out very quickly. I've recently realized that that's not always a useful superpower. When I was in the Army and in corporate America, somebody would say, oh, we need to do this and this. And I would just see what needs to happen. But then they're like, we're going to spend the next 6 hours talking about how we should do this. And I already know what we need to do.
What kind of games? Because these days there's a lot of computer games. So I believe it should be some special games. If you can name, maybe our listeners, followers will do the same, at least for their children, because there is plenty of.
Yeah. I like games with a certain amount of chance, but not too much chance. So if it's completely random, that's no fun. There has to be some sort of strategy component where being good rewards you. You might not win every time, but for families, and I play this game very often with my wife and my parents, I like a game called Ticket to Ride, and it's you like run train companies and you're trying to connect a bunch of cities on these tickets that you have. And if you connect them by your railway by the end of the game, you score points for the tickets. But if you don't, you lose points for the tickets. There's only limited numbers of tracks, though. And so sometimes somebody blocks you and then you have to try to build around to try to make your connections. And so it's fun because it's interactive. You have to weigh, should I build this area here? Even though that's not super important to me because it might get clogged up later and I might not get to make my ticket in that area. I play war games. So I've played games that have recreated the Napoleonic Wars. I've played games and they're diplomatic, strategic, economic, all those. That game takes about 200 hours to play with 7 players. So you're playing.
So today it's online games, like the same topics, but no, it's still.
That was a board game, board game. And then I played World War II games, like the entire World War II, the politics, everything the things leading up to war. And that took about 300 hours to play. We played 4 to 6 hours a week, every week for 18 months. How long?
When you say we, you mean your family or English?
I played with friends while I was in college, while I was going to the University of Texas in Austin.
So it looks like a lot of your education coming from the game. Actually,
I learned a lot more from games probably than from formal education.
Yes, because as far as I understood from your biography, there were some kind of hiccups in your educational journey. You started and you changed, which kind of normal maybe, but what you would say, how this educational path, which is not straightforward, we wish for our children at least, how it shaped you?
Yeah, school has always, because I learned so fast, school has typically been just boring for me. I used to read books in class while they're teaching. I pay enough attention to get the concept, and then I just start reading books. And sometimes I'd get caught, and then they take my book away. So then I'd have to bring a magazine for when they took my book away, so that I still had something to read. But yeah, my sister was a straight A student. She's very smart. And she had one of my teachers. She was 3 years behind me in school. And all of her peers know that she's a straight A, super smarty pants. And she said, one of the teachers asked, because of our last names, she goes, "Oh, is your brother Daniel?" And she said, "Yeah, that's my brother." And she goes, "Oh yeah, I had him." And one of the students go, "Oh, and was he a straight A student too?" And the teacher said, "Let's just say Daniel was one of the smartest students I've ever had the pleasure of teaching." And I got a D- in her class, very bad grade. But she acknowledged that
So it was public school, I understand, yes?
I did
Public
go to school. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that actually games and strategies that you learn from games, and even strategies sometimes to avoid formal education, were good preparation, I believe, for your army service. So please tell a little bit about this part of your life, which I understand shaped your kind of even what you are now. Yes?
Yeah. Everything I learned is foundational to who I am today. I would be hard pressed to meet someone that I had nothing in common with, because I've done so many things across so many industries. Yeah, it's just, that's the nature of my curiosity. It takes me in a lot of different directions, especially when I reach a level of expertise or mastery in something. I have to continue growing. And so once I feel stuck, I've got to change what I do. So that was where I was. I was 23 years old. I was managing a pizza place, working 60 plus hours a week. I was already a certified training manager, so certified to train managers. And the next step up was district supervisor. And I'm like, they're not going to promote a 23-year-old to a district supervisor running. And so I saw myself at a dead end. And so I looked at the military and joined the Army. I said, "What's the hardest thing to qualify for?" And they said, "Signal Intelligence Linguist." And so I said, "All right, I'll do that." And I had the scores, I had the grade, you take a test, and I maxed the test. So I literally could have had pretty much any job that I wanted in the Army. I had to take a second test to test my language proficiency, and I scored high enough on that to qualify for any language, although I didn't max that by any means. I have a best friend who did. He's very smart in languages. And that's honestly, just memorizing new things like languages is one of the bigger challenges for my learning the details. But
So how many languages you know speak?
really just English and Spanish. I understand Portuguese fairly well, but I can't speak it. I'd say I understand about 80% of what's spoken in Portuguese, probably 60% in Italian, maybe, but enough to get a gist of what's going on.
Speaking about your army experience, like briefly, I'm not asking about military secrets, no, but I understand it was actually based to your today business interrogation type of business. How
Sure.
all this interrogation started, probably from some courses you've had back in army?
Yep. So I started off, joined the Army when I was 23, became a paratrooper, Spanish linguist, and I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, and that was mostly fun. But I had a wife, and then I didn't have a wife. I had a kid in between there, and I wasn't seeing my kid enough, and he was in Texas and I was in North Carolina. So I got out of the Army and joined the Army Reserves, moved back to Texas. And when I got into the Army Reserves, I had the opportunity to become an interrogator. And so I went to interrogation school and did very well. And they said, "Really, you should be teaching this stuff." And so I transferred to the school and I started teaching interrogation. I had a deployment where I actually did real world interrogations, and that went and came back and started teaching as a contract instructor. And then I also joined they were pushing a bunch of people through. It was after 9/11, trying to get a lot of interrogators trained, and the standards started dropping. And I'm not somebody who likes to compromise on things that are important. I think the job of an interrogator is to get critical information that can save lives. And so if you can't do the job, you shouldn't be an interrogator. So I knew it was going to be bad for me because I was going to start failing people. And so I transferred, and they were building an advanced interrogation and analysis course. So that's getting all the information and putting together all the pieces. And so I helped create that course. I built a lot of the scenarios to test the students with, give them the challenge of this is the kind of approaches that you would have to run to make this, to get this person to cooperate with you. And these are the pieces of information you could get, like building your own game. Go back to my gaming practices. So that's I use a lot of those skills today.
So what kind of people you interrogated? Can I ask? What kind of people?
Sure. I had a very wide variety. I don't know very many people that interrogated on as many. I talked to bankers, like the highest level bankers, weapons of mass destruction type scientists, biological weapons, chemical weapons, not so much nuclear, but delivery systems like rockets and things like that. Intelligence people, military people, politicians, cabinet.
As a part of the judiciary process, I'm trying to understand how these people came to you.
It's intelligence collecting. The commanders set the guidelines. And in my case, our commanders were we had a political and mission, more or less. And so we were finding out what was going on here, whatever the priorities of whoever you're working for. That's how business interrogation works. The CEO is my commander, and I'm interrogating their business to get them the information that they need to make better decisions in their business.
Oh, okay. I see this type. Yes. So when you get this idea of starting your own business as interrogator, I would say, like being after 50. And why I'm asking, because one of the points of my show, actually to show people after 50 that many things is not still possible, but it's actually realistic to do with your life.
Sure. Yeah. I would. So just to run down the things I've done after 50, at age 50, I taught myself how to play bass guitar. So that's one thing. I'd never played, maybe practiced on the piano a little bit when I was very young. And then I became an entrepreneur when I was 51, and I had a cyber consulting business called Ethereal Rodent Cyber Consulting. And I used to design disasters for businesses to help them practice response. So I would like ransomware, right? It encrypts your computers and then you don't have access. You can't help your customers. They ask for money. Will you pay to get your information back or not? And so I would simulate that and ask leadership teams, would you pay a ransom? And I would challenge their thinking. Lots of them would be like, no, I'd never pay. And I'm like, wait, what if it were $1? And if you didn't pay, you're done as a business and all of your client data gets leaked on the internet. And all of your employees.
I think it's what many businesses need these days, actually. It's not joke and not game. It's a reality of our 2024 life. And so I believe your business should prosper and at least like clients know about you. And we are speaking about what kind of businesses? IT related or any kind?
Any kind of business that does leadership. Any business, I would say, that's probably medium-sized businesses and bigger, 100 employees or more. Because it's not that smaller businesses wouldn't benefit, it's just probably not where their priorities are. I think as you're building a business, you get to a point where now if you lose the momentum that you have as you grow, you've got a reputation behind you, you've got momentum, you've got market success. And if that were to be stopped, like your reputation gets destroyed by your client data being leaked out or something like that, you're going to crash and burn. And then you would have to start back from scratch to rebuild your reputation under a new name, probably, right? As long as you're small enough where, okay, my business is destroyed, but I could restart it at not a huge cost. Maybe you just restart it. But my goal is to ask questions to get people to think about what can they do to be more resilient when trouble comes. And so I used to call it, and sometimes still do, call it pre-crisis response, right? How do you think about how I would react to it? It's like a fire drill, right? Do you know how to get out of the skyscraper you're in when the building's on fire? If you haven't practiced it and the building's on fire, everybody's going to be running around panicked. But if you practice every week or every month how to exit the business or the building orderly, lives get saved. And I think it's the same thing with cyber. Unfortunate for me, effectively my business model was to sell a simulated disaster. And then COVID came and everybody had an actual disaster for their business, and they didn't need to practice another disaster on top of the disaster they had. So I had to pivot again. And I did some leadership training first. I joined the John Maxwell Leadership Company and as a speaker, trainer, coach. And I refined, I already did all those things, but I refined and practiced and honed those skills. I did some project work for training. I did some training work. I got to work with some cool clients. And then I got hired by a Fortune 500 company to design a cyber exercise program. And so I built out an entire program for them. I then started, I guess my wife and I had committed to building a nursing school. And as you read, I have a passion I lived in Honduras. I have a passion for serving in Central America. And so my wife and I had agreed in 2015 to help this priest and nurse build a nursing school. And so we had a team together, and that got finished in 2021. We came together as a team, and we were working with 3 bishops, Episcopal bishops from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And
Can you tell a little bit more about this phase, which you already transferred? I've had special question about your humanitarian, I would say, mission. So I understand its mission and work, how it started and in what state it's now, in what places this project exactly in Honduras and El Salvador, and how many people now, local people around these places are working and benefiting.
Yeah. Sure. So the nursing school, when we started off, it was already there, but they were just teaching out of the church. And so they didn't have a school. They didn't meet the requirements from the Department of or Ministry of Education for Honduras. And so they needed a building. And so my wife and I said yes to this, thinking, how are we going to raise $50,000 to help them build a building? And over 5 years with the right partners, we raised $235,000 and built them a modern building that has doubled their capacity. They now can do 40 students a year instead of maybe 12 to 16. And it really is changing the entire environment. It's in central Honduras, this town called Siguatepeque. And it's really been a blessing. We've met amazing people all over Honduras. And one of the things that we did at the dedication is we had these bishops there and we asked them, what's your biggest challenge? And they said, it's people leaving our countries. They're leaving their families and they're mostly coming to the U.S. The U.S. mindset is these people are coming here and causing problems for us, but really they see it as opportunity. And the situation is bad in a lot of these countries. And as long as the situation there is so bad that it's worth the risk to come to the US, they're going to make that decision dependent upon how easy it is for them to come here and stay here, right? But the harder it is for them to get it into the country and to be able to remain in the country, the less likely they are to come. And so that's one of the shifts that's happened over the last few years is we had a place where and I can tell stories because I've talked to people who, when we started trying to help the bishops, I went down to the border and I interviewed people on both sides, people who had come across, and asked them, why did you come? And it's almost always economic or security. Gangs are targeting them.
Yeah.
And we even worked with a prominent figure who would be somebody who's deeply respected. And one of his children was targeted by gangs and had no choice but to leave the country because their life was in danger. There's so many things that push and pull. But
I'm very sorry for these people. I feel that majority of them will be, I'm sorry to say, second class, if not in United States. They're already risking their life and saving on the road to the border. And yes, they're not good informed about what expects them.
Yeah.
So I hope that at these places that you help to arrange, to create nursery and hospital in Honduras and other places, people see a reason to work and be around their families rather than really be divided from the family and to go to, I would say, not the best place for life now, as I see United States, from the perspective of people who just coming without language, without money, without required skills to live in a new place.
And not only, and very well said, Emily. I think you summed it up beautifully. I believe that you've effectively, our policy is inviting them in.
Yes,
right now, it's so weak. We are letting them come in. Even the legislation that just failed in the U.S. was ridiculous. It was like, as long as we're getting 5,000 or less illegal people crossing our border per day, we're going to do nothing. I'm like, it's
just damaging psychology.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. And then they come here, but they don't have legal status. You said second-class citizen. I agree completely. It's maybe it's not slavery, but some of these people, they owe cartels, and they
will be slaves. Look, I'm an immigrant. I've had several immigrations, and I come, at least I was prepared. I come with education, with language which I still should have learned. I changed my profession in every country I lived, but I've had some background about what to expect. And still I consider myself immigrant after 27 years living in Canada. And all of us, but we were professional immigrants. We came legally, and I'm speaking in my kind of business only about legal, because I can imagine what kind of troubles and dangers people coming through when they coming illegal. Even state invited them, but they already hated by local Americans, which I understand working their life to meet the ends, and suddenly people are coming and they get more attention than locals. It's all against any logic. And I wish that more people will see, as you were trying to do, opportunities in their countries. And I know that Bukele now trying to do something in El Salvador, and some other Latin and Central American countries are trying to keep their best citizens, because who is going up north, young and skillful, yes? So leaving the old and children without attention. So it's disaster for the local community. So what should be done? I understand it, and I'm really sorry for these people, and I'm sorry for America, because it's really breaking the fabric of society.
The numbers don't get quoted often enough on the media, but it's almost 10 million people in 3 years. That's more
seven and more. I'm following that, and I'm following even. Sorry, we're going off track. What's happening in the Texas border? It's troubling. And okay, so my next question would be: where do you see America and Texas in particular is going? What's your future vision?
Yeah, so politically, from my heart, I want what's best for people, and having a bunch of people. And you're absolutely right. What we're doing is we're stealing the most entrepreneurial people out of these countries and leaving them with the people who are not ready to take that country up. And then what we're also doing is, instead of those people becoming the best and brightest and most talented and most entrepreneurial and hardest working in their own countries, we're having them work here in a system where they're highly limited. They can't get a good job. They can't get,
obviously for me.
Yeah. And so that's a problem that, and again, the fulcrum for that, whether they come or whether they don't come, is how easy is it for them to come? And again, there are people who are refugees and they need a place. But if we're flooding in millions of people who just want more economic opportunity, first of all, we don't have 10 million extra jobs in the US. And then if they don't have the legal right to work, that means we're incentivizing businesses to pay people illegally. I know of a young man that was here. He was in construction. He was invited to go work on a project for a week. He went across state lines to another state. He helped build a house, and then they didn't pay him. And what's he going to do? You can't go to the police because you're not legal.
Yeah. It's slavery of different kind. I see we both became passionate about this one. No, because it's painful to see and observe what's going on. And I still hope, we all hope, that somehow common sense or people will prevail. And even in such situation, I'm just thinking how your life philosophy changed over the years, going through different phases of your life, living in different countries, working for army, and observing what is going now in United States and in your state of Texas.
Yeah, I would say, and I hope this honors you, but one of the things that I'm always doing is, as I evolve, I'm looking for a way to better serve people, to add more value to the world, to help other people add more value to the world. That's been my focus. After working for another company, I wrote a book called Customer Driven Leadership with my partner.
Yes, congratulations. I'm afraid we will not have time to discuss all your books.
No. Well, that's because I wrote too many. I went from no books to 5 books in a year and a half. And so that was pretty crazy. I've got book 6 where I'm working at right now. And each book is completely different. They have nothing to do with each other.
And again, you started it being after 50. You didn't have previous experience of writing, and it just all like wisdom, experience, maybe time get together for you to find something new in your life. Yes?
Yeah. Trying to continue to keep growing. I think that's one of the things that's super important to me. That's the third book I push for. If you're not doing something in your life to grow you and make you a little uncomfortable, maybe you're living a life a little bit too comfortable, and maybe you should just at least take up a hobby where you're learning something new, bowling or scuba diving or something you've never done before.
And you're touching here the points that I was thinking about many years. There are some people who are really good. They get to some career, I would say, to some level in their education or prosperity, and they settled.
Yeah.
And they settled, they have family, they have some hobby, free time. But there are another category of people who are unsettled. And other settled people do not understand them. What you are missing? Why are you doing this kind of crazy stuff? Why are you starting from zero? Or you moving to different place? What kind of bug sitting in you and digging inside? So how you would understand what is this internal, I don't know, flame or internal engine which makes some people to be different?
Yeah, I think some people are very entrepreneurial in nature, and other people specialize. And so it's general knowledge in a lot of cases versus specialized knowledge. If you're a generalist like I am, and I'm a generalist to mastery in some areas, but still it's the breadth of what I know that helps me add the most value to people. I can answer any question on cyber exercises in the world, but how often does that serve the people I'm with? Whereas just the problems that I've run across in my life and how fast I can understand where other people's problems are. And I invest in coaching too. I want people to pull new things out of me. So, for example, this week, Dan Sullivan is one of my coaches, and he was talking about if you can be good at a lot of things, but you can only be great at one thing. And you have to know what your one thing is that can propel you to greatness. And that convicted me, Emily. I was like, wow, how would I boil what I do to one thing? And I was like, maybe it's that I focus and multiply the genius of others. I take what other people, the great ideas of other people, and I see how to make it better and how to take some risk out of it and how to get some extra opportunity packed into it. And I do that really only for people who are trying to make the world a better place. And in the end, I settled with, I think my one thing is that I focus and multiply the genius of others for the betterment of the world. And that kind of clarity is not something I could have ever generated. I needed a coach. I needed somebody to ask me a question I'd never thought of before. Somebody asked me this week, hey, can you interrogate yourself?
Yes. It's what I'm trying to do now, but I need to learn from you, probably.
You're doing great.
Good professionals.
You're doing such a great job. It's asking insightful questions to get people to think about things in ways that they've never thought of them before. And that's really, I would encourage people to continue to grow, to think about, even if you're a specialist, right? If you're a specialist, you keep growing until you get to the peak of something. And then usually at some point you retire, right? But that means now you don't do the thing that you spent your whole life getting good at. So
you might retire from your old work or old you. For me, retirement, actually, it's a time of reinvention. Like, not for every person it might work. Actually starting your new life chapter. When you have experience, you have probably family and children grow up, and you have more time for yourself, for your passion, to develop your interest, and you should have interest actually to develop, to start from. And you probably have somebody more or less finances which can help you to go, because many projects require finances. Let's be honest. In this regard, I will ask you this question. What do you think, in what age person became old, in your opinion? Because I'm not speaking about biological age, which is one point, but what helped people to be active and young for the longer years? What is your recipe? How you see for yourself and what you propose for others?
Yeah, I think
being after 50.
Sure. I think you need to have a purpose bigger than yourself. And that can be a community that you're part of. My dad has got a boating community that he's part of. I have international communities that I'm part of. And that somehow I get to write some of these books. But I think really the moment that you no longer are the person that you've been, like at that point of retirement, wherever that happens, that's a pivot. That's a pivotal point in who you're going to become, because you're no longer going to be the person that you've been for maybe 30, 40, 50 years. And so now you should, before you clock out for that last day of work, you should be thinking for a year before that. What do I want to be doing? Maybe I should start growing to that now so I don't fall off a cliff. And maybe I just take a step in the direction of something I'm already thinking about and preparing for, right? I know a lot of people are
speaking about legacy, how to live a legacy. Many people don't think about it, but subconsciously, do you have some recipes or advices for people how to keep young, active, and healthy eating, exercises? Like it's by default, we're not speaking about, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, what you would say?
Yeah, I love finding faith-based things that are adding value to the world. That's super important in my life. And then the other thing is look around and see what needs to be done and get involved with a group that's trying to make a difference there. That's my 2 cents, is continue to add value to the world until it's over, right? If you live for retirement, I think you're going to find that's a cliff, that once you're living without purpose, what's the point, right? At some level. So continue to find ways to add value into the world until you're not capable of doing it anymore. That's my thought.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Daniel.
you. Appreciate you.
God bless you and God bless America.
Bless
I'm
you.
really wish for this year and years to come. And it was my pleasure to speak with you again today. And I hope it will be the not last time.
It
Thank
will.
you, Daniel.
Thank
Bye.
you.